Hello and welcome to today's video. It's been a while since I've made a video like this, except it's not royal high this time. You see, I'm going to be making a cosplay of a character from a webtoon comic called the Moth Prince, specifically the Moth Prince himself, Fern. Now, making a Fern cosplay is going to be a challenge for me, as I've never made myself leggings, halter neck top, wings, or fake thorns. I barely have any experience sewing with netting or making hooded capes, also wig styling, and the list goes on. I'll be breaking the cosplay up into parts, so today you'll just be seeing the bottom half of the cosplay, the leggings. Fern doesn't really have shoes, so the quote-unquote shoe is just going to be included on the leggings. With that said, remember to subscribe as to not miss the rest of this cosplay being made. Anyway, let's start showing the sped up footage. Now, none of the patterns that I had on hand would really help me make leggings, and I didn't really want to pay for a leggings pattern, so I took an old pair of leggings and unpicked all the stitches, so I was left with a fabric pattern to say. Also, one of the fabrics that I got just wasn't in the right colour. It was literally bright green, so I got some fabric dye and turned it to a more neutral colour. You can see the difference between the two colours. With the legging pieces, I decided to make a paper pattern, just because it would have been super difficult to try and use a pattern made out of fabric, specifically stretchy fabric, on velvet fabric. It was going to be a complete nightmare, so yeah, I made a paper pattern. I then pinned the pattern down on some folded fabric, so I ended up with 2 fronts and 2 backs. Without moving them, I pinned the curved parts together and sewed them together. I opened both pieces out and laid them on top of each other, good sides together, and I started pinning the seams to one of the legs because at this point I wasn't sure if I wanted to install a zip on one of the sides. I didn't end up putting a zip in because it wasn't necessary, but you know, this time I thought I was going to put a zip in, so. And of course I sewed that up, and I also sewed up the other leg the exact same way, but I didn't record that. But yeah, I had 2 legs. Now, this is where it can get a bit confusing, but what we're seeing here is actually the bottom of the leg pieces. Of course, as I said earlier, Fern doesn't really have shoes, and I'm kind of just extending the leggings to like also cover the foot. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually sewing on a bit of fabric to cover the back of my foot, like the heel part. I could not get this under the sewing machine, so I did have to hand sew this part. But yeah. And here was a little try on. I have the little like dance shoes that I'm gonna wear with the cosplay on there, and yeah, I don't know what I was doing in this clip, to be honest. As you know, I did take apart a pair of leggings for a pattern, and here I am using the elastic out of the leggings waistband to kind of create a I don't know, just it was yeah. After I'd sorted out the elastic that would keep the fabric over the shoe, I cut out some fabric that would be covering the front of the shoe, like that. And just like with the heel, I hand sew the block of fabric onto the front part of the leggings with a blanket stitch. I decided that before I wanted to properly shape the fabric around the shoe, I wanted to quickly sort out the seams on the rest of the leggings. So I cut all the excess bit of fabric off of the seams and I sewed that. With all the seams all sorted, it was time to try and shape the fabric around the shoe. So I started off by cutting the blocks of fabric into, you know, a better shape. Then after that, I just sewed the seam onto the bottom of the shoe covering. I'm not quite sure what this camera angle is, but I decided to put everything back on and cut off all the extra fabric that was around the seams, and I got to work on putting a bit more elastic in there. I decided to sew the elastic on whilst it was still on my foot, and Bonnie wanted to come say hi. I had to stop sewing every time she came over to me because I didn't want the needle up in the air when she was there. I took the leggings off so I could comfortably sew the the elastic onto the other side. Now that the bottom bit of the leggings were done, it was time to try and sort out the waist part of the leggings. Now I needed to kind of do an effect where it seemed like the moss was kind of like fading into the skin, so I had to make all these like little spike markings on the top of the waistband. And here's where that fabric that I dyed at the start of the video comes in. I cut out 2 rectangles that would be long enough to not only be the width of the leggings, but also be able to cover the spikes that I drew on. I then sewed on those like spike markings that I made on the leggings with the netting in between. Then from the outside I cut off all the extra bit of velvet fabric, so I was kind of left with these spikes in the velvet fabric. And then I just quickly sewed up the 2 sides of the green netting rectangles. I put the leggings back on and started to cut the green netting out in the same way I did with the velvet fabric. Of course, the green spikes are gonna need something to keep them up, so I got some like nude coloured mesh and I'm cutting that out in a rectangle. Now, I couldn't quite figure out if this was gonna work or look any good, so the footage does get kind of scattered. But yeah, I start with just sewing the 2 ends of the rectangle together, so I had kind of like a loop. After a quick try on, I knew that the mesh was gonna get like all ripped and stuff, so I decided to fold it in half and just kind of iron that out. Yes, I am using straighteners. I then spent the next 2 hours just hand sewing the nude mesh to the green netting. It took so long to do. After my first try on without wearing like another pair of leggings underneath, I found that the fabric that the leggings were made out of were super slippy, so I needed to add in an elastic waistband, which was a little bit more difficult than it is, you know, installing it onto a normal pair of leggings, because the top of these leggings have all of the netting and stuff. I had to kind of sew the elastic waistband to all 4 seams just under the spikes so that you wouldn't be able to see it through the mesh. And surprisingly, this did help a lot with keeping the leggings up. Last thing I decided to do was kind of iron out the spikes since they were a little bit lumpy and were kind of curling over. So I am doing that with a miniature pair of hair straighteners. And here's the finished leggings. now. I think these are pretty good for like my first time doing something like this. So let me know what you think also. Honestly, there's not much I can say about the leggings other than they're pretty comfortable. And yeah. Here's a closer look at the like dance shoes. I needed some kind of footwear so that this would be convention appropriate, so I decided to choose dance shoes because of the flexible sole, and that's kind of how they look from the bottom. Honestly, it's not that noticeable, even if it does like kind of come up at the heel a bit, you just don't really notice. Of course, most of the pain came from doing this part. I think it looks okay from my ability. I am not looking forward to also doing this on the top 4 times. Gotta do it 4 times on the top, and then I've got to do it at the top of both of the gloves as well. Not looking forward to that at all, but hey ho, I've got to do it. So yeah, this will be a series. So next video will be me making the top, then after that it will be either the gloves or the wings, and then after that it will be the wig, and then I've got to make the cape as well. Yeah, hopefully you guys do enjoy this series, even though it's not Royal High. I'm really excited to like have this cosplay and have it finished, so yeah, hope you stick around for the journey.